During the 1880s, a growing influx of Italian immigrants profoundly changed America's workplace culture. Many of them eagerly accepted low wages, providing contractors with an abundant source of cheap labor. This was especially true on the railroads. In the latter part of the 19th century, the United States was growing, expanding westward on rails of iron and steel. The total amount of tracks crossing the land quadrupled between 1870 and 1900. To build these new roads, project managers hired Italian immigrants in ever-increasing numbers. In 1882, the editor of a prominent journal noted the fundamental change in the makeup of the workforce.
The typical railroad builder of a few years ago was a newly arrived Irish immigrant, ready to do hard work for moderate pay. Of late, there has been a marked change, and the representatives of the Green Isle have been largely supplanted in this work by the sons of Italy. So complete has been the transformation that the superintendent of Castle Garden recently remarked, "The Italian is the railroad builder of today, as the Irishman was a generation ago."
In the 1880s, Americans despised the foreigners who were edging them out of the workplace. However, attitudes were very different in the previous decade. At Christmas in 1872, residents of Virginia welcomed gangs of Italians who were hired to help build their railroads. Weeks earlier, those same Italians stood, alone and helpless, on the docks of New York City.
In the closing weeks of 1872, almost 2,000 destitute Italians crowded into the Castle Garden Immigrant Depot in New York City. Victims of a cruel scam, they had been promised high-paying jobs in America. Instead, they were abandoned on the docks with no prospects and nowhere to go. Bernard Casserly, the superintendent of Castle Garden, housed the penniless newcomers at the emigrant refuge on Ward's Island. Then he sought work for them. But finding employment for hundreds of men in the month of December proved impossible. So he turned his attention to the southern states, where work was plentiful.
The Civil War was a national tragedy that cost the lives of more than 600,000 soldiers. Over 30,000 of them were Virginia farm hands who never returned to their fields. The scarcity of farmers dominated the agenda of the Virginia Agricultural Society. At its meeting in October 1872, the president of the organization, General W.F. Lee, proposed the enlistment of foreigners to solve the problem. The following month, Governor Gilbert C. Walker promoted Lee's idea during an address at a farmers' convention in Petersburg.
"We have not 1/4 the population in Virginia that we ought to have. The importance of immigration is generally conceded. We want no pauper immigrants, nor others to break down Virginia. What we want is honest, industrious, thrifty citizens who will come and improve and build up our lands."
Walker had just received a message from Bernard Casserly.
The Commissioners of Immigration of the state of New York desire to inform the citizens and residents of your state that there is, under the charge of this department, a large number of immigrants desirous of obtaining employment.
The general and the governor now had a source for the manpower they wanted, but construction projects upstaged their needs. Casserly's immigrants were enlisted, not as farmers, but as section hands on Virginia's railroads.
In 1871, engineers constructed a branch of the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad through Richmond and out to the docks of the Virginia Tidewater. To avoid destroying important landmarks, city commissioners decided the line should run through a tunnel beneath the city's historic Church Hill district. Funds were allocated for the operation, and digging commenced on the first day of February 1872. But trouble arose soon afterward as the unstable ground led to frequent, dangerous cave-ins. In addition, an inadequate supply of workers forced contractors to look beyond Virginia for help. The newly arrived Italians in New York represented a potential solution to the shortage. Mary Keeley Fabry, an affluent resident of New York City, heard about the situation in Richmond. She urged her husband, a wealthy merchant, to pay for the transportation of some of the abandoned Italians to Virginia. Aware of Mary's plan, the editor of the Charlotte Democrat heaped contempt on both her and the foreigners.
It is proposed by a benevolent lady who had been charmed by the brigands to settle them in Virginia. But the Italians don't like Virginia, and Virginia won't have the Italians.
Despite the journalist's claim, authorities in Richmond prepared to welcome more than 200 of the impoverished Italians. Newspapermen eagerly followed the journey of the immigrants from their sanctuary in New York to the worksite in Richmond.
A telegram from New York announces the departure from that city of 235 destitute Italians for Richmond. The party reached this city today in the Wyanoke of the old Dominion line.
Sizing up the newcomers, a columnist for the Richmond Daily Dispatch offered his confident appraisal.
They are mostly young and healthy-looking fellows and will no doubt do a deal of work.
At first, the inhabitants of the town viewed the Italians with approval.
The 230 Italians who recently arrived here to work on the Chesapeake and Ohio Tunnel through Church Hill are likely to become permanent residents of Richmond, as they like it here and we like them. They are excellent laborers.
But after 2 months underground, 50 of the Italians appeared dissatisfied with the work. They applied to a local labor agent, hoping to find jobs elsewhere.
I have about 50 Italian laborers applying to me for work, on railroads or at coal mines. Any parties in want of such labor will please call at my office.
3 months after their arrival, opinions differed on the performance of the Italians. Some praised their efforts.
The Italians now employed at the tunnel and on the terminus of the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad are an industrious, frugal, and painstaking class of laborers. They mind their own business, work well, and promptly paid for what they get. We have room for more of them.
Yet others voiced disappointment.
One Virginia African is estimated to be worth 3 Roman citizens in that kind of work. They failed to give satisfaction and were all discharged after some months' trial.
In the middle of December 1872, a second group of Italians was sent to Virginia. They would lay track and build bridges in the Shenandoah Valley for the Valley Railroad Company. Originally just a dozen in number, the contingent quickly grew to over 100.
This road, for a greater part of the way between Harrisonburg and Staunton, will be ready for the laying of the track in a few weeks. 2 of the sections, numbers 2 and 3, are being built by Italians. The first 8 miles of the road are under the supervision of Robert C. Lee, a nephew of General Robert E. Lee. There are about 100 Italians at work on the Valley Railroad. They are generally able-bodied men, fine-looking men, polite, quiet, but good and industrious workmen at lower wages than our people work for, and they are much liked by contractors and the people. They expect to locate permanently in Virginia and will make good citizens. In its course, the Valley Railroad, going north from Staunton, crosses the Middle River and crosses the North River 3 times, necessitated on account of the tortuosity of the stream. Hence, it was necessary to construct 4 large bridges to span these rivers. In the construction of these bridges, the masonry of the Valley Railroad is certainly unsurpassed. In the execution of it, the masons who had been engaged in the Mount Cenis Tunnel were employed.
The Mount Cenis Tunnel was the first major railroad passage under the Alps. Italian and French architects used innovative tools such as hydraulic compressors and dynamite to expedite the work. The 8-mile corridor linking Italy and France was an engineering marvel that is still in use today.
The skill of the artisan and quality of material excite and attract admiration, and the labor, science, and engineering skill displayed upon these gigantic bridges will ever be a monument to the engineers of the Valley Railroad. "90 miles southwest of the span at Staunton, the Italians built another viaduct, this one across the Gish Branch, a river near Salem, Virginia. There are now about 200 hands at work on the Valley Railroad. We learn that this force will be increased to 500 as fast as the hands can be secured. A number of Italians are now at work getting out stone for a bridge to be built at Garst's Mill. They are having some beautiful masonry done by the Italian stonecutters, lately from the famous Mount Cenis Tunnel. Their work will compare in beauty and finish with any similar work in the country.
An editor at the Richmond Daily Dispatch wrote a detailed report about the Italians for his curious readers.
Your correspondent had an idea that these railroad men lived a sort of half-civilized life in their rough shanties among their mules, exposed to the heat and cold of the seasons, and carrying with them the dust and dirt of their work, when they would wash off, scrub up, put on clean clothes, and come out into civilization again. But we were agreeably surprised to find them living like white folks, their wives and children with them, with the comforts and even luxuries of life around them, and dispensing the hospitalities of their establishments in lavish old Virginia style.
The Panic of 1873 and the resulting depression permanently halted construction of the rail line over the Gish Branch. However, the bridge still stands and is now listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The Valley Railroad Stone Bridge at Staunton, which is also enshrined in the register, was completed in 1874 and served for almost 70 years. These structures stand as enduring testaments to the skill of the Italian architects who designed them.